Hi, my name is Rich, and today we're going to be talking about the Fiend patron for the Warlock in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Now this is one of my favourite patrons because it's the free patron. You get it in the basic rules and everybody has access to it. And a lot of the other patrons, the Celestial for example, has the ability to heal the party. The Hexblade has great melee hand-to-hand combat abilities, and the Fathomless Warlock can control the battlefield and manipulate the terrain. The Fiend itself is focused on dealing damage at range, and it's great at picking off large groups of weaker enemies instead of going one-to-one with a giant dragon, for example. This can be exemplified in the expanded spell list. At level 1 you get Burning Hands, which is a cone of fire that goes out for 15 feet and can tag lots of goblins or kobolds or gnolls, any small creatures. It does scale up as well, so that's an advantage, and it synergizes with some of the feats and abilities available for the Fiend Warlock. The other spell at level 1 is Command, which can be used to great effect to try and tie up someone else's turn. You can use it to make people grovel on the ground, run away, or just stop. My favourite is Breakdance. I'm sure with some creativity you and your party can decide what the best commands can be. At 2nd level you get Scorching Ray, and this is a step up from Burning Hands. You launch lots of little fireballs instead of one giant cone of fire. It's still a great way to deal damage, and on theme with Fiend Warlock. There's a lot of fiery hellfire theme to it. The fact you get 3 different firebolts to throw at people is great for a Fiend because you can target different creatures, and you get this at level 3. You don't have to wait until level 5 to use an Eldritch Blast to attack 2 people at the same time. The other spell you get at level 2 is Blindness Deafness. Now this is situational, but it can be very powerful when trying to infiltrate an area and you need to deafen a guard temporarily, or if you're in combat and you want to blind a melee attacker and give the advantage to the barbarian in your team. The 3rd level spells you get are Stinking Cloud and Fireball. Now Fireball doesn't need any introduction. It's one of the most powerful spells you can get in the game, along with Counterspell and Revivify. It deals a large amount of damage, it scales up, it covers a good area, and it's got a good range. Now Stinking Cloud doesn't deal as much damage as Fireball, but the advantage of it is that it can linger on the battlefield. You can basically deny an area from your enemies. And it can be counteracted by a gust of wind, but the more options you have the better, especially if you run into a creature that's resistant or immune to fire, then Stinking Cloud is a good substitute. At level 4 you get Wall of Fire and Fire Shield. I'm sure you've noticed the theme of fire in this subclass. First off, Wall of Fire is area denial. You can shoot the flames up and cause damage, but its main advantage is to try and pass the battlefield. You can create a barrier that splits the enemy party in half. Now Fire Shield doesn't level up with the other spells, but it does have the advantage of being flexible. You can prevent damage from fire or cold sources. And the fact that it lasts for 10 minutes is a great advantage. You don't have to keep casting it again and again, and with the Warlock's limited spell slots, that's always helpful. The 5th level spells, you get Flame Strike and Hallow. Flame Strike lets you summon what is more or less a fiery tornado of devastation. It's a powerful area of effect spell, and it deals good damage. Hallow is the interesting option though. You do get it later on in the class, but the ability to make hallowed ground, it stops certain creature types from going in and out. And I'm not sure of the ruling, but if a celestial creature is in the area when it's cast, I think they'll stay in the area. They won't suddenly bounce out. It does take 24 hours to cast this, and works until it's dispelled. But I think that if you're at 5th level spells, you're at a certain part in the story of your campaign where you'll have a regular hiding spot. You'll have a regular place to go back to. This can always be helpful if you want a good night's sleep. And I'm sure if you're playing a campaign like Ascent into Avernus, you can think of multiple different ways to use this. Now, let's look at the abilities you get as the Fiend Warlock. At level 1, you get Dark One's Blessing. Now at first glance this doesn't seem like a fantastic option, but getting temporary hit points can mean the difference between life or death. It does imply that you're going to be killing a lot of smaller creatures to start harvesting their temporary hit points, but it doesn't work very well if you're fighting one-on-one with a giant creature. Again, this displays the strengths and weaknesses of the Fiend subclass. being able to attack lots of creatures at the same time is great, but if you're fighting against one big creature that's immune to fire, then it really stunts the capabilities of this subclass. At level 6, you get Dark One's Own Luck. It's a fantastic ability, but it does seem a bit out of place. It's one of those abilities, I'm sure when all of these subclasses were designed, they had hundreds of different abilities and they said, oh, this one will be good for this one will be good for that. And this is a general good ability, but it doesn't match the theme of the subclass. Yes, there are some tenuous links to devils being lucky and making deals, but it's tenuous at best. At level 10, you gain Fiendish Resistance, allowing you to change your resistance on a short or a long rest. Now, this is great in theory, but by the time you get to level 10, a lot of the creatures you're fighting against will have magical weapons, and I don't know where the silver weapon comes into it, but I'm sure it's relevant in some settings. But generally speaking, at level 10, if you're not fighting creatures with magic weapons, then you're fighting the wrong creatures. I would have to say this is just a mediocre skill at best. Resistance is always helpful, but the caveats at the end of this kind of dampen the enthusiasm I have for it. And finally, at level 14, you get Hurl Through Hell. It allows you to open up a teleportation hole, and it'll allow you to spin them around hell a couple of times in one turn, and then it'll take 10d10 damage. It's psychic damage, which a lot of creatures are not resistant to this, so that's fantastic. It does help solve the problem of fighting one-on-one with a creature that the Fiend has weakness with at lower levels. The real crowning achievement of this ability is that it ties up the creature you're attacking for a turn. Because they're teleported out of the battlefield, it'll allow you to attack other creatures or get your whole party to surround the area and get set up for the next attack. You do have to hit a creature with an attack to trigger this, but I think that by the time you get to this level, your Eldritch Blast should be more than sufficient. Well, this subclass has a couple of good abilities, a couple of mediocre abilities, and I think the spell list is robust, but it does have a weakness for fire damage immunity and resistance. For one of the starting subclasses, I'd say it's okay, it's not fantastic. I think the Fathomless Warlock, the Hexblade, the Genie, the Celestial, they all work to their own strengths, and this one is just okay. So if you take this, you'll be taking it because its theme is very related to the campaign you're playing. It's still great fun to play as, but I wouldn't recommend it for min-maxers. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time. And don't forget to download the free subclasses over on the Patreon. Bye!